This week we've gotten tons of previews about the new armor stats and the Armor 3.0 rework, and it's been very cool. I today have compiled all the information together. I'm behind the people who got to go to Bungie and see it firsthand, but I've taken more time, done a lot of math, and figured out how this works. I also have a new armor stat planner that you can play around with, see how builds will work, and start thinking about what you're going to be aiming for in Edge of Fate. And I think just a lot of great value here and some good analysis that will hopefully help you out when Edge of Fate comes. This all seems very cool, but it's definitely a lot different, so there's gonna be a lot to tangle with. If that all sounds good to you, let's get into it. I'm Engineer. First, there's an outline here. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read yourself. But I'm going to go through all these points here just up front for people who haven't watched my videos before. I will have timestamps of every single topic throughout this video so that if you want to just refer back to something quickly, you can. I'm also doing slides in Google Slides, and I will link that in the description as well. Every resource or tool, I will also be linking in the description, including 2 large text Reddit posts that explain a lot of the same things. My goal is to be as helpful for you as possible and as convenient as possible. I might get less YouTube revenue, but that is okay. I'm fine with it. In general, we're going to be going over all the new stats, what they do, how they scale, all of that. We'll be going through how the new armor work, and then I'll have some conclusions at the end. Like, weirdly, you might want to farm ability and intellect armor right now, but I'll get into it a little bit more as we get there. So first off, we have 6 new stats. Now, a few of these are pretty similar to what we had before. Stats give a certain set of benefits from 0 to 100, and then they will give an additional set of enhanced benefits from 100 to 200 because our stats now go up to 200. And then the last and I think coolest point of this is that every single stat point provides value. You don't have to hit a stat tier of like 20 or 30 or any of that anymore. Every single point will provide some amount of value, and that's great. There's no more wasted points unless you go over 200. But hopefully don't do that. Starting off at the top with our first new stat, that is health. This will generally replace resilience on existing armor. And the first benefit you get of this is up to 70 HP of health per orb. That is equivalent to the recuperation mod. So if you have 100 health, you can drop your recuperation mods off your legs and free up some space for a surge or something like that. It will also give you up to 10% flinch resistance. Both of those scale linearly, so they will scale evenly from 0 to 100. As you get above 100, you get your enhanced benefits, which I've indicated with this gold text here, just like in game. And those are your shield recharge rate goes up to an extra 45.6%, and your shield health goes up by an extra 20 HP. Your combined health and shields currently is 200 HP, so that's about a 10% health gain. Not a whole lot. Unfortunately, these are the 2 benefits of a stat that I have the least amount of information on. I don't know exactly how it scales. I don't have a lot of good points for between like 150 and 200, so I'm still trying to dial in how this is, but it does seem to have a curved relationship. So there will be some diminishing returns or some accelerated returns somewhere in the range. Moving over to melee, this is a really straightforward stat, and so are the next few. This is replacing strength on existing armor, obviously, and all the next ones have this similar setup. They provide a cooldown reduction. Now, from yesterday's TWID, we did hear that low stat investment, 0 to 30, your abilities recharge slower than they used to, but at high investment, you will have higher recharge than the fastest recharge you were able to get to before. Another way to phrase that is that 30 of, say, melee is equivalent to 30 strength now, but 70 melee is equivalent to 100 strength now. And I've done a lot of looking at snips from videos and stuff to absolutely confirm that, and I've got this very well nailed down. This will, at 0 stat, give you a 15% penalty to your cooldown, but at 100 you will reduce your cooldown by 65%, and that's really cool. The next one that you get with this stat on 0 to 100 is you get more energy gain from all sources. This includes any chunk energy gains, think like Pugilist or Kickstarts or anything like that, and energy recharge scalers. So that's like Crown of Tempest or Ember of Benevolence and things like that. Those will all be scaled by this. Now the 70 stat value is equivalent to your pre-Edge of Fate benefit granted. So 70 melee will give you the same amount of energy that you're getting now, but from 70 to 100 you get an extra 90% energy and regen from everything, and that is massive. I'll talk about this just a little bit more, but that is a huge benefit. Lastly, the enhanced benefit is increased melee damage, and that is 0 to 30%, and on melee this applies to powered, unpowered, and glaive melees, which is really cool. Now that damage is very linear. Cooldown reduction and energy gain have curved relationships, but I'll talk about those separately and show you some cool graphs in a minute. Grenade, this is almost exactly the same as melee. It's going to boost that cooldown reduction and then the energy gain from all sources, but the grenade damage on this will go up to 65%, which is huge. Notably with this, because grenades can potentially have a flat gain factor of 50%, this gets you almost to completely canceling that out. You can get to 95% energy if you have 100 grenade stat, which is very cool and cancels out a lot of the nerfs from way back in Season of the Wish. Our next one is Super, and this works similarly on the energy gain from sources. Still 0 to 190%, and it is set so that 70 is equal to 100%, but this will affect all your active super generations. So that's things like orb, dealing damage, defeating enemies. All that stuff will scale up to almost double what you get now if you invest in this stat. So finally, you can invest in super. And I didn't mention it before, but super obviously replaces intellect on existing armor. Lastly, if you get above 100, you can get up to 45% increased super damage, which is crazy. We have limit break this episode, which is a 30% super boost, and this is 15% more than that. And that is crazy. And once again, that damage is scaling linearly. One thing to mention is that currently intellect will decrease the cooldown of your super as you go up to 100. It does not do that any longer, but that decrease was only about 31%, and it honestly wasn't worth all the stat investment before. And the active energy is by far the main way you get super anyways, so this is much more beneficial. Once again, the class stat is what will replace recovery on existing armor, and the cooldown reduction and energy gain from all sources works very similarly here. So just like melee and grenade stats, it's going to do the same things, but instead of increasing damage, it's going to grant you an overshield when you use your class ability, and that overshield is up to 40 HP. Does not sound like this is a fully overshield, so it's just really another extra 20% health. Now the duration is affected by the ability used. Dodge and thruster will only give you an overshield for 5 seconds. With barricade and rift, the overshield will last for 10 seconds, which is not very long. I'm not super psyched about this, but it might be helpful in some activities. The overshield granted is very linear though. It's basically 4 HP for every 10 stat you go over 100. Very straightforward. Lastly, we have the weapon stat, and this replaces mobility on existing armor. So I hope you've been saving some mobility rolls in your vault. No one's doing that. This does more things than most. This will boost reload and handling up to 10%. On 0 to 100, and then your minor and major damage, that is your red bars and your orange bars, you can boost the damage to them up to 15%. All stats here are going to scale completely linearly across their range. When you start getting above 100, you get several more benefits. The chance your ammo bricks for special ammo or heavy ammo have a chance to be double-sized bricks, and that will max out at 100% chance for a large brick at 200 stat. On top of that, you can boost your primary and special weapon damage against bosses by 15%, your heavy weapon damage against bosses by up to 10%, and your damage to PvP players by 6%. And all those upper values are at 200 stat. So a lot of investment for that, but very helpful. It's going to be a really solid, consistent source of potential damage if you can hit that 200 weapon. That ability cooldown reduction energy gain that applies to grenade, melee, class ability, and super for the energy gained. I've mathed out a lot of curves. I spent way too much time in Google Sheets and Excel this week. So first, let's start with cooldown reduction. Like I quoted from the TWID, 70 new stat is equivalent to 100 current stat. 30 new stat is equivalent to 30 current stat. So just keep that in mind. 30 is basically 100%, and then you're reducing from there. As you can see on this curve, it tends to flatten out near the end, so you really get pretty weak benefits from 0 to 30, and then you get pretty small benefits from 70 to 100. But do keep in mind that the 100 stat current regen rate is 50%, which is already huge. So you're getting another 15% by investing 30 points. But the main reason you're going for that 70 to 100 is actually for energy gained. Because like I said, this is a pretty exponential relationship here. And as you go from 70 up to 100, you get an extra 90% energy gained. You've almost doubled the energy you gain. So think of Demolitionist. It does 10% grenade energy before flat gain factors. That's now 20%. Absolutely insane. And as I mentioned, it affects percent regen boost. So the big takeaway here is if you care about an ability, get it stat to 70. And if you really want to use it a lot, get it to 100 every single time. There will definitely be some builds where you're trying to get your melee, your class, and your grenade all up to 100 just so you can spam them as much as possible. I mentioned before flat gain factors. If you don't know about that, I have a whole video on it. Basically, back in Season of the Wish, there were factors put on abilities that reduces the amount of chunk ability energy they gain based on their cooldown. If it's a long cooldown, it's going to take longer. So for example, a solar grenade or vortex grenade gets 50% energy from all of those sources. But with this, you multiply it by 190%, and now you're back up to 95%. We are almost to pre-nerf levels on our strongest grenades, but our grenades that have higher flat gain factors are getting even more benefit. If you have been using Mothkeeper wraps, you can throw that effectively twice as much as possible, which is crazy. That already can throw grenades quite a bit. We're gonna be chucking grenades like Shax is always yelling at us to do with Crucible, but not in Crucible. We'll be doing it in other playlists. This is honestly one of the best changes that I think has happened in a long time. The flat gain penalty nerf was one of the worst for build diversity, and this is going to absolutely pretty much cancel it out while buffing some of our shorter cooldown abilities. So just all around amazing. One thing I do want to mention is that we might see some cooldown changes coming with this. It didn't look like it in the preview footage of the things we could see, but that might be coming. So just do hold out for an ability article or something like that. As mentioned in the tweet as well, this affects percent regen effects, like they mentioned Crown of Tempest specifically. So just as an example, think of Heart of Inmost Light, one of the best ability spam exotics. When you have max stacks on this, it gives you plus 800% melee or grenade regen speed. With this factor and 100 of those stats, you can have 1,520% additional regen, which is crazy. Now, Vesper of Radius, the best class regen exotic in the game, can get up to a 1500% class regen right now if you're surrounded by 6 enemies. That becomes 2850%. You won't be able to cast your rest fast enough with that. And as mentioned, we might still see some nerfs, but this is just very cool if you like ability builds, and if you've watched my videos, I love them. They're some of my favorites, so very excited about it. That's pretty much it for stats right now, so let's talk about Armor 3.0. Really quickly, I'm going to go through how the armor stats roll, how the stats are modded, exotics, and show you my armor stat planner tool, which will be linked in the description. So first, we have 5 armor tiers. In the preview, we were shown the stat ranges that each tier can roll, but there was a correction made that tier 4 would now be able to go to 75, which is the new maximum stat. Currently, the maximum stat a legendary armor piece can get to is 68. So what I've done is I've adjusted these ranges a little bit, but they are estimates. These might be a little bit different in the final build, but I don't think they're going to be majorly different. Generally, your highest stat rolls, which would be 62 to 68 currently, is a tier 3 armor piece. And then tier 4 will be from there up to 75, so 69 to 75. And tier 5 has a tighter stat spread. It's just 73 to 75, so you're almost always guaranteed to be close to max, but it also will give you 11 mod energy and a tuning mod slot, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So if you're kind of comparing and contrasting current armor and new armor, because our current armor should convert over to the new stats, current max stats on legendary armor is 68, but the new is 75. Current armor rolls at least 2 points in every stat, so it's a little bit more spread out, whereas new armor rolls only in 3 stats, so it's going to be higher values, but only in 3 stats. It should let you play around less with Dim and D2 Armor Picker and just really be like, this is my stuff for grenade and super. This is my piece for weapon and melee. Things like that. So, as I just mentioned, they only roll into 3 out of the 6 stats. Your highest stat, which we will call the primary, and the second highest stat, secondary, roll into stats based on armor archetypes. These are basically subtypes of the armor. And you will be able to control these with ghost mods. So there are 6 coming with Edge of Fate, and these are Gunner, which is primary weapon and secondary grenade, Brawler, which is primary melee and secondary health, Specialist, which is primary class and secondary weapons, and Paragon, which is primary super and secondary melee, Grenadier, which is primary grenade, secondary super, and lastly, Bulwark, which is primary health and secondary class. The third stat that does gain energy is 100% random. So these 2 will pick the 2 highest stats, and then the third is random among the remaining 4. It is important to note we only have 6 of these. There is theoretically 30 potential archetypes, but you're only getting 6 to start with. So you're going to have to be a little bit intentional about how you're farming your armor and building out. And that's why I'm kind of doing some of these planning efforts now. A lot of the 75 stat armor has a pretty set roll of 30 primary, 25 secondary, and 20 tertiary. So consistently high, but focus on the primary, then the secondary, then the tertiary. Pretty cool. I like that it's being more consistent, because right now the way armor stats rolls is super confusing and weird and kind of frustrating. How do you mod the new armor stats? There's a few changes coming. So you still have your standard stat mods, which are +5 or +10 to a single stat. And with us being able to go above 200, these are going to become extremely valuable. Usually sometimes didn't need all these, but I think you're going to want some kind of stat boost on every single armor piece now. Now, when you get to tier 5, you get the tuning mod slot. And so the tuning mod slot has a random attunement. So it is attuned to a specific element. If you look at this picture up on the right, that is health attuned because it can only boost health. And what the tuning mod slot lets you do is give +5 to your attune stat in exchange for -5 to any other stat. Now, if you did not get the right attunement stat and you don't care about health, for instance, then there is one more option, and that lets you give +1 to your 3 lowest stats. So it is a net gain of 3 points, but it's going to be to stats that you also don't super care about. So I think that's kind of a nice compromise because there's a random element that has a 1 in 6 shot of being on a single stat that you want, which can be kind of rough, but having the +1 fallback I think is really helpful. One thing I want to mention, font mods. Not a lot of people use these right now. If you're not familiar, these will give you a stat buff whenever you have armor charge. And right now they give you +30 with 1 copy of the mod, +50 with 2 copies, and +60 with 3 copies. So you generally never run 3, but it's a pretty easy way to get an extra 50 stats in something if you need to. Where these are located in your armor, the font of super will be on your helmet. The fonts of grenade and melee are both on arms, so they're kind of fighting each other there. Font of health will be on chest. The font of weapons will be on legs, which is unfortunate because it's going to be fighting with weapon surges, but that does make thematic sense. And lastly, the font of class will be on the class item, so that makes a lot of sense. But some of these stats being really beneficial, say font of super, I think is going to be really effective for this because you only need to be above 200 when you're casting your super. The rest of it isn't necessary. So if you can put those mods on in the middle of a fight, or just make sure you have armor charge before you throw your super, that's all you gotta do. You don't have to invest quite as many points into it. One more thing I want to mention is masterworking. Masterworking is a little bit different now. Instead of being tied to the energy, it is a separate upgrade and it goes up to 5 levels. And for every level, you get +1 to your lowest stats. So that is potentially +15 stats, but it's to the ones that are not your primary, secondary, or tertiary stats. So that's helpful to kind of round you out and make sure you're not taking too many penalties. In a lot of builds I've planned out so far, I'm usually around 45+ if I'm fully masterworked through. So that's kind of a nice upgrade and kind of keeps you from seeing some of these increased penalties we are seeing in the new setups for the stats. Now, briefly, I want to talk about existing armor conversion. This is a little bit speculative because they haven't been extremely clear about this, but they were talking about exotic armor in the TWID yesterday, and they also said specifically that mobility is becoming weapons, resilience becomes health, recovery becomes class, discipline becomes grenade, intellect becomes super, strength becomes melee. We don't 100% know what's going to happen with existing masterworking, which gives 2 to each stat, and what's happening with artifice, but we're expecting they probably should remain. They're probably not going to nuke existing armor because people will be mad. So in some cases, existing armor might be a little bit better. New armor can roll up to 75 base stats versus existing 68. Both have max base stat values of 30 per stat. You can't get higher than 30 in any stat on existing or new. The existing masterwork will give +2 to every stat, including a 30, so you could get 32, whereas the new sets have no way to do that other than tuning, which you have to do +5, -5. The biggest benefit to existing armor though right now is it can roll with combinations that new archetypes cannot. Like there is not a weapon super archetype yet, so you might want to look at mobility, intellect armor right now because those are actually decent pairings because they're in different stat buckets, and that should convert to weapon super armor once Edge of Fate launches. Moving over to exotics. Exotic armors are expected to convert stats just like legendary armor. At Edge of Fate launch, you can go to Ada and use tokens to generate a copy of an exotic you own with new stat rolling via archetypes. So you can get that new archetypes sort of roll on any exotics, and you'll get 20 tokens per account. So plan out which exotics you care the most about across your classes and just think about that. But I imagine Rahul will also be available to also roll new exotics for you, and you'll probably be doing that to reset his reputation to get new exotic armors. So not a huge deal. One thing to mention too is that exotics will be equivalent to tier 1, 2, 3. They will not be able to reach 75 base stats. That is straight from some of the interview questions. They are keeping them where they're at right now. That may change in the future. We'll see. Exotic class items are a special case. These will be assigned 50 stats, 30 in one stat, and 20 in the other, based on the perk roll. We've seen some of these in the previews, and they said that they would be assigned predetermined stats based on their perks in the TWID yesterday. I hope they do more than this. 50 stats is very low. 50 stats is a very low tier 1 roll. This honestly seems crazy to me. I don't know why they would give them 50 stats. They are powerful, but I don't think they're more powerful than existing exotics, which will be able to roll up to 68. So we'll see how this works. Hopefully it changes before launch, but I think they're a little bit on a trend of nerfing Prismatic. I want to talk about the armor stat planner that I came up with. I spent a lot of time on the spreadsheet. This will let you pick your tiers, your archetypes, your tertiary stat, masterwork levels, tweak mods, and then it will automatically calculate all your benefits based on your total stats. There's also a handy tab that has all the stat benefits every 10 stat tiers, so you can kind of see what the value is in those just in table form. With that, let me just go ahead and show you that. Okay, here's a completely blanked out version. So let's say that I want to do a grenade spam build. That's really straightforward. You're going to go for grenade archetypes in each slot. Easy. So that might be the first thing you want to select. You can always tweak these later. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is select your tiers. So just for hopes and dreams, I'm going to select tier 5 in every slot except for my gloves, because a lot of exotics for grenades are on the glove slot and those cannot reach tier 5. So we don't want to plan for 5 tier 5 pieces because then we can't run an exotic. Now, the next thing you want to select is a high, low, or medium stat roll. This is just where within that range that I listed you're expecting to roll. So once again, we're praying for the optimal roll here. So high, these are going to be those perfect high rolls. And you can see it's starting to fill in the numbers now. And so we were already up to 147 grenade, and that few points missing is just because that tier 3 roll. If you do get lucky with a tier 3 exotic that has 30 discipline or grenade, cool, you are going to be set. But I don't know exactly how the lower tiers are going to roll their stats, so it may not even be possible to hit 30 at tier 3 in the new system. So now you want to think about your tertiary stats. Now, I play a lot of Warlock, so maybe I want some class. So I'm going to put a couple of these on class. That gets to 40. I might do one more. We're up to about 60 or so. I want to hit 70 ideally, so I'm actually going to go one more for class. Health in PvE doesn't seem too big of a deal as long as you have some source of healing. Grenadier is grenade and super, so I can't really go for that. I think for my last tertiary slot, I'm going to go for weapons because no real harm in getting a little bit of extra weapon benefit. Now, you can see our total stats here. If we absolutely want to hit 200, we need to start, well, first, think about your masterworks. Once again, we were hoping for a maxed out roll, theory crafting what that will look like. So we will go ahead and put in the 5 times masterworks on each piece, which gets us those little extra stats. You can see filling in the middle. And then we're currently sitting at 147 grenades. So we're going to want to use all 5 of our stat mods to boost that grenade up. And then that gets us to 192. Now, if we can get one of these tier 5 pieces to have a grenade attunement, then we can do a plus grenade, melee, plus 5 grenade, minus 5 melee, and that gets us to 197. Now, I know a lot of you will be like, I need to hit 200, but there's not an easy way to get exactly to 200, and anything over 200 is completely wasted. So I'm actually just going to sit at 197 and unfortunately upset people who hate on even numbers. But remember, all the numbers matter now, so that's good. Now, where are we looking at with our stats? From here, I'd really just like to boost the rest of these, so I will actually just put whatever in for the tuning attunement and then just go with the lowest stats boost. So that's going to give us just +1 in all those, and we can take the benefit of that. Now, last thing to think about is any other boosts. So do we want to take a font mod? We could take a couple super fonts if we wanted to and get 173 super. That'd be beneficial. You would just put 50 down here in the super. This is where you would also account for fragments. We don't know how fragments are going to change up, but that could be pretty dramatic. So you can see right now with 2 font mods on the helmet for the super, we're at 197 there, 173, 84 class, and 42 weapon. So pretty solid. all around, you can see what we're getting. We're getting on grenade the full 65% cooldown reduction. We are getting 190% energy gained. Our melee energy gain though is just 12% extra, and we're actually taking a 7.1% penalty on the melee cooldown reduction, which, oops. The super, we're getting the full benefits there, and we're getting the damage increase of 33%, which is equivalent to limit break now, which is nothing to sneeze at. And all we need to do is just maintain some armor charge to get that. If we do drop that 50 points from the fonts, then you can see that drops us down to 10% super damage increase, but still that's not bad. And then on class ability, we are sitting at 84. We're not taking any penalty, and we're getting a little bit of extra energy gain on that, which if say we're relying on a rift or a barricade, that's pretty helpful. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Click the link in the description. It will have a button in the top right that says use template. That'll make a copy for you, and then just have fun with it. And then you can click these tabs here and you can duplicate them, and then just keep making different options. And then, as I mentioned before, this is the full stat table. I will be updating this as we find more information, but I feel really good about everything except for the shield recharge rate and the shield health, which are highlighted. Just to show you a few armor stat builds, the grenade build we just did comes out to very similar to what I have here, and you can see we are using all grenadier armor, really any tertiary stats, and grenade stat mods, and that gets you to the full cooldown reduction, the full energy gain, and 63% damage increase. We're just under the cap there. Now, melee spam, very similar, but you're going to be using brawler armor because that is the only one with a melee primary stat. I would then focus on health or class additionally. Brawler is already going to come with a lot of health from the secondary, but you can see once again, we're getting those cooldown and energy gain benefits, and then we're getting up to 29% out of the 30% damage increase. Now, if you want to go max ability spam, which I would recommend for like a Heart of Endless Light build, or maybe like a Nezarec Sin, Crown of Tempest, or Spirit of Endless Light on Prismatic, then you might want to try and tackle 100 in melee, grenade, super, and class. If you don't care about your super, you can dump that one, it gets easier. But if you're trying to get 100 in all four of these, it's actually a little bit hard, and you're probably going to need one font mod to make it happen. But that's really not too bad to get 400 stat. Quadruple hundreds before would have been really challenging to manage, and now it's pretty easy to do. You can see all the benefits here. We're not getting really any damage increases, but you could probably find a few extra points for that. But we are getting almost the entire benefits for cooldown reduction and energy gain to all of these. Now, some more kind of DPS focused ones. First, I tried to make a maxed out super damage one. So we are getting up to that 197% super, which is pretty solid. That is giving you 43.7% extra damage, which is huge. The tertiary stats don't really matter. Just do what works for you. We're using Paragon armor, which is super primary, and melee secondary, which is a little unfortunate, but it's okay. And then I'm using all super stat mods just to boost that as much as possible. Now on weapon damage, I'm using all gunner archetypes, and then really any tertiary stats. And then I'm using weapon stat mods, and then I'm using plus super minus grenade tuning, because gunner boosts weapon as primary and grenade as secondary. But we don't really need the grenade for this build if we're focusing on DPS as much, so we are tanking the grenade just a little bit to get the super up. We get up to about 98 before fonts, and I'm using 2 super fonts, so we get up to 148. And the result of that is we get a 21% damage increase to our super, or we're almost maxing out the extra damage on the weapon. So we're doing like 14.6% primary special damage to the boss and 9.7% extra damage with our heavy weapons. So pretty solid setup, and really kind of demonstrates the strength of tier 5 armor tuning. But we do have to roll 4 super tuning attunements with high stat rolls, and it's going to be hard to reach that, but that's why you want to try and farm for it. As I mentioned before, if you get mobility and intellect armor now, it should convert to weapon and super respectively, and because you can get those up to 30 stats, you can actually get a pretty high super weapon armor piece. If you use 2 super font mods, which is the ones I'd recommend you focus on font mods for, because you don't want to give up weapon surges on your legs, you can get just under 200 of both of these pretty manageably. So that is pretty cool. You can see we're getting 44% super damage increase, and we're getting 15% primary and special weapon damage against bosses, and 9.8% heavy weapon damage against bosses. So everything in one. That's why I do recommend that you might farm that. That's been a lot of information. Thanks for hanging in there. Hopefully you took some breaks if it was too long. Just a few concluding points here. The new stats really reward investment. If you are focused on abilities at all, really try and get to 70, and even further, try to get 100 it's an ability used frequently. Armor archetypes are going to make armor chasing more consistent. You can use a ghost mod and most of your armor should drop with that archetype, especially kind of predetermined loot. And there will also be ways to get specifically attuned loot in the new portal. So that's really cool. It's very challenging to get 200 in a stat. It takes a ton of investment. I think when this started out, people were like, oh, I can get 500 stats. I can get 200s. No, that is nearly impossible. It is extremely difficult and you're pretty much not doing it without font mods. Mobility Unlocked Armor might be kind of a interesting farm right now. If you have extra engrams from episode echoes, go to failsafe and just see what you can get. Maybe you can get some double 30 spikes, which is the maximum roll right now. That would be a 68 total stat roll, and that might be good. But if you can't, don't sweat it. It sounds like armor is very farmable in the new setup. I think it's gonna be really good. I also wouldn't be sharding your vaults. Your other high roll armor might be valuable for a little bit, but eventually max roll new armor will exceed it. So if you don't have great high stat armor, you also don't really need to sweat it. Overall, I think this change is gonna be great for the game. Armor is finally gonna be something that we care about and that we farm, but it's gonna be really easy to filter. You can look at the archetype, look at the tertiary stat, look at the total stat combos on it much easier, and know whether it's good for you. And on top of that, I'm really glad that all the stats are useful. There's not as many that are just complete dump stats, and there's just a lot of value with any of them. So I think that's really cool. Thank you for listening. Once again, a lot of things will be linked in the description that are helpful. If you enjoy it, please subscribe, tell other people about it. I'm trying to make this as clear as possible because there's tons of information out there, but it's kind of all scattered and people are saying different parts of good information. So I'm trying to bring it all together. With that, I'll let you go. Thanks and have a good one.